Hello, ladies and gentlemen. We're on A225 Block 3, Decline and Renewal 1880-1914, edited by Robin Mackie. Unit 17, page 92. Industry and Finance. Millionaires, year 2001, for all these reasons. Economies of scale were hard to achieve. Ships also took time to build, so that buyers needed to make decisions based on estimates of future need. As a result, demand tended to fluctuate widely. In 1883, tonnage reached a peak of 420 tons, but fell to 172,000 in 1886. There was further peaks in 1902 and 1907, each followed by slumps, before a peak of 693,000 tons was reached in 1913. But 1996, page 119, each ship represented a substantial investment not only by ship owners but also by shipbuilders who committed their berths and resources. In a highly competitive market, yards were often forced to cut their prices to the bone to obtain orders. Leaving a shipyard empty was costly, but building on spec without a buyer was risky. Slaven, 1982, page 30. Most yards were small and owned by single men or partners, perhaps related by family ties. This may have allowed them to respond quickly to opportunities, but made them vulnerable if problems arose. The risks were high, and there were a number of spectacular failures. Shipbuilders William Todd Lithgow, 1854 to 1908, served a shipbuilding apprenticeship before using his inheritance of just over 1,000 to enter into a partnership in 1874 with two older men, Joseph Russell, 1834 to 1917, and Alison Roger, 1843 to 1909, to acquire a yard in Port Glasgow. Within Russell and Co., Lithgow worked on the construction of a line of sailing ships with semi-standardized parts used for carrying cargoes such as coal and grain was not essential. This work provided highly successful, and in 1881 was not essential. This work proved highly successful, and in 1881 a new yard was built that was capable of handling steel plates. The partnership was dissolved in 1891 when Russell retired, leaving Lithgow sole owner of the newest yard. Around 1900, the firm switched to steam but continued to focus on cargo ships. Russell and Co. remained profitable through these changes and poor years in the early 1900s, partly because Lithgow's personal links to ship owners delivered a steady stream of orders, and partly because of the firm's focus of one type of ship. Standardized cargo vessels. Lithgow became seriously ill early in 1907 and died of the cancer the following year, aged 54, leaving the firm to his two sons. His estate was over 1 million, of which over 8% was invested in the firm. Moss, 1986. William Beardmore, later Lord Invernan, 1854 to 1936, was the son of an English engineer who had moved to Scotland as a partner in engineering works. William studied at a prestigious engineering college, the Royal School of Mines in London, before returning to Glasgow to take over his father's share in the firm. By 1886, he was sole owner of William Beardmore and Co. During the 1890s, he expanded the works so as to be able to produce steel armour plating. And in 1900, he decided to enter shipbuilding, building a massive new combined shipyard and engineering works at Dalmuir, below Clydebank. In 1902, however, he ran out of credit and was forced into a partnership with the Sheffield armaments firm Vickers, Son and Maxman. Expansion continued with the building of a gun manufacturing plant and the acquisition of steel mills to ensure supplies of the necessary highly quality steel. The relationship with Vickers, however, was always fraught, not least because of Beardmore's autocratic management style. By 1913, he was once again in sole charge of the firm. The cost of Dalmore work stretched the firm, but orders for a new dreadnought battleship eventually ensured financial security. Beardmore, who was already the major shareholder in the Glasgow car manufacturers Arroll Johnston, was expanding into aircraft production by 1914. His firm was one of the largest arms manufacturers in Glasgow during the First World War. This was rewarded in 1921 when he became Lord Invernan. By this time, however, his sprawling business empire, which was quite unable to adjust to peacetime demand and post-war slump, which was in serious trouble. In 1927, the firm was effectively bankrupt. The firm was broken up and Beardmore forced to retire. He died in 1936, leaving a state of 850,000 but debts of 750,000. Moss, 1986. Exercise 17.8. From the brief discussion of the shipbuilding industry, can you see points that can be related to the discussion about the performance of British economy early in the unit? There are a number of points that you might have thought of. Shipbuilding was an industry where the UK seems to have maintained most of its lead, and this was built on technical excellence. It might have been an established industry rather than a new one, but here the UK was innovative and successful. Most ships were individually produced. You may have noted, however, that Russell & Co. used some standardised production, and both profiled shipbuilders did invest in new yards and equipment. Both Lithgow and Beardmore had technical training. Lithgow served an apprenticeship, while Beardmore studied at a prestigious engineering college, so they had a solid background in technology. Both fitted Chandler's personal capitalism model, running their business on their own and inheriting it from or passing it on to family members. Beardmore, in particular, was notoriously autocratic. This form of business served both of them well, although it also played a part in Beardmore's downfall. Their business ability allowed them to build up large fortunes during their lifetime, although Beardmore later lost most of it. In Lithgow's case, this was enough to get into Rubinstein's list of millionaires. It is tempting to lump shipbuilding in with industries such as coal, cotton, and iron and steel. The demand for ships collapsed after the First World War with disastrous consequences, as it did for the early staples and the regions that depended on them. Yet there were also differences. If industries such as coal and cotton often continued to rely on existing technology or methods until 1914, the success of British shipbuilding was based on technical innovation, employees and employers in Glasgow. One of the defining features of the shipyards was a squad system of work. The craftsmen who were responsible for specialised tasks, such as riveting huge steel plates together in hull construction, worked in squads which included men with a range of highly specific skills. From the employer's perspective, this kept costs down since they hired squads as required. And in the cotton industry, their use of skilled workers also limited the need to invest in new equipment. But the system also had advantage for the workmen. Squad chose their own leaders who negotiated pay rates on their behalf and also managed the work, including hiring unskilled labour necessary to support the skilled craftsmen. Squads moved from yard to yard depending on demand and the rates offered. Payment was by task rather than by the hour. Such a labour system obviously reduced management overhead costs, but also gave power to skilled workmen and their unions. McKinley, 1996. It was made for thought industrial relations, as employers and craft unions used the swings of the market to bargain for more advantageous rates. Richard Tawney, unskilled worker in Glasgow, 1910, located at the end of the unit. This is an extract from the evidence presented by Richard Tawney, 1880 to 1962, later a famous historian to the Poor Law Commission. Tawney was employed by Professor Smart, one of the Poor Law Commissioners, to conduct research on the operation of the labour market in Glasgow. Here, Tawney explains how there could be a large pool of unskilled and underemployed labour in a city such as Glasgow, where there was also such a demand for skilled workers. What is Tawney's explanation for this issue? Tawney highlights the transition for jobs for boys to adult work on leaving school. Boys go first into jobs that are seen as work for boys and are paid accordingly. Aged around 20, they move into the adult labour market without any skills and join an ever-growing pool of unskilled labour that drafts in and out of work and in and out of dependence on the poor law. The implications for the poor law were, of course, what concerned the commissioners. But Tawney's analysis is interesting both for what it tells us and how the debate had moved on since the emphasis of individual and moral failings in the mid-19th century, and because it sheds further light on employment in Glasgow, Levitt 1988. As Tawney suggests, there was also a demand for skilled labour, but the way the labour market worked meant that most men, and indeed women, were struck in unskilled, poor paid and casual jobs. The ability of skilled workmen in the shipyards to control their work through the squad system was partly reliant on high hurdle between unskilled and skilled work. Young men could become skilled workers only if they served as apprentices, working alongside skilled colleagues. The squad system gave craft workers and their unions the ability to limit the number of apprentices. Women employers. Much of this unit has been about the activities of businessmen, but Esfeth Gordon and Gwyneth Nair had used consensus and other data to demonstrate that the varied economy of Glasgow created opportunities for women not only to work, but also to run their own firms. Many of these were concentrated in just a few industries. Thus, clothing and laundry were important, as were lodging houses, Gordon Nair 2003. But the rise of consumer culture created new openings. Among the most striking Glasgow innovations were tea rooms, which not only provided cheap places for office workers to lunch, but were also frequented by more wealthy women looking for someone to rest when in town for shopping or entertainment. One Glasgow woman who seized this opportunity was Catherine Kate Cranston, 1849 to 1934, the daughter of the hotel keeper who opened her first tea room in Argyle Street in the centre of Glasgow in 1878. Further tea rooms followed on their main shopping streets, such as Sauchiehall Street and Buchanan Street, also known as Miss Cranston Tea Rooms, to distinguish them from those run separately by her brother. They are now chiefly remembered for Cranston's patronage of the Glasgow architect Charles Rennie Mackintosh, 1868 to 1928. Tea rooms such as Willow Tea Rooms and Sauchiehall Street were clearly targeted at a wealthy and often female clientele. Cranston was a well-known figure in Glasgow at the turn of the century and was an obvious candidate to provide catering for the Glasgow International Exhibition in 1901. Although she married Glasgow businessman John Cochrane, 1857-1917, she continued to run a business under her maiden name, Kinchin 2004. If the shipyards employed only a minority among the city's labour force, the city's elite was also more diverse than a focus on shipbuilding might suppose. One way this diversity has been explored is through surveys of the city's elite. You may recall from the unit, The Making of the British Middle Class. Stanner Nenadick's work on the middle class in Glasgow in 1860s, historian Richard Trainer has built on this and, using similar methods, traced the occupational background of a narrow group among the city's elite, members of the town council or the leading civic and voluntary institutions such as the Chamber of Commerce. The university and the Royal Infirmary trainer argues that it was important to include such non-official posts in the survey because of the role of such institutions in governed cities during a period in which the role of central and even governmental was limited, and because some leading individuals shunned political office. He traced the careers of between 79 and 165 leading Glaswegians in 1841, 1881, and 1901. Summaries of his findings note that this mythology effectively excluded women since they were not eligible for or intended to such offices. Although they may have played a major public role either as consorts to their husbands or in separate philanthropic organisations. Table 17.5 shows the continuing dominance of Glasgow's civic institutions by the middle class. Not only were there almost no landowners, but no working men, but almost no white-collar workers made it into this sample. But as Nenedick also found, the middle class was diverse. In addition to merchant industrialists, there was always a strong professional group, and smaller shopkeepers and craftsmen were also represented by 1909. Trainer uses the evidence and of the consensus to argue that Glasgow, and this was true of other big industrial cities in the north and west of the UK. It was never just an industrial city, as you know from Unit 2. The city had first developed because of trade links with America, and intercontinental commerce remained important. Many of the merchants in Table 7.5 ran shipping firms that traded with America and the Empire. The building industry was bound to flourish. Hello?
Hi, can I speak to Justin?
Yes. Hiya.